welcome to Mr. Randy's Wine and Spirits. I am Mr. Randy, and today we're going to be doing a full review of Sheep Dip, the blended malt Scotch whiskey. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome. All my returning viewers, you know how we do. Come on in, let's get the show on the road. So this is the full review, which is the second part of a three-part series. The first part being off the rip, get it home, crack it open, have the first pour, share my first impressions with you. Because that's what it's about. It's all about sharing. I promise you. Number two, down here where we're at today, halfway through, I give enough spirit in the bottle, enough time, space to move around, open up. For better, for worse, it is what it is. Today, we got a lot of information and a good story to go along with why it's called Sheep Dip. So, part three is going to be the final pour. We get down to the final pour, thusly named, and we decide whether or not the last pour is anything like the first pour and everything in between. So, we are talking about the original Old Bury Sheep Dip. Let's get a little bit in here. Okay, Spencerfield Spirits Company. It is a 40% alcohol by volume, 16 single malts. It was matured in oak barrels. There's a sort of an explanation of there on it. So here's the tasting notes. I'll give you a little stuff. It says rich golden copper highlight. We're going to get a look at that in a moment. Sheep Dip, there you go. There's a little bit more information. I got a lot more to come off of mine. So there's all your distilled, bottled in Scotland for the Spencerfield Spirit Company, imported through New York. And nothing on that side. And now we are done with the box. Thank you for your service. Now, the bottle itself pretty much mirrors everything you saw on the box. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get a pour on, shall we? That's a pretty decent cork pop, even halfway through this bottle. Kudos for that. All right, that's good enough. All right, so let's take a look at this, shall we? I washed this glass before the video, so I didn't think it dried completely. I didn't buff it dry, but that's not bad. It's kind of hanging in there. It might take a moment. Let me see if I can give it a little swirly swirl. There we go. I'm going to let that sit for just a second. So, perfect. So this was a mixture of Highland and Speysides, and it doesn't specify a whole lot of between these points here. It's a Highland, Speyside, sherry, and bourbon, and those range between 8 and 21 years. It does say there's some peated Isla malts in here, which is kind of interesting. These were brought to us by the McLeod Distillers. They have their own other line. They have quite a few, actually. So this was 40% alcohol by volume. I overpaid for this bottle. I'm talking about how I feel about how much I paid. I overpaid by at least $10. I kind of... It took me too long to get around to this one. I've seen it in a few places for closer to 30. Now, on average, there's two places that sell it roughly for 40. This place was more of a convenience buy. I've done this before, and I've also regretted that one because I paid $15. I think I paid $15 more than I should have for that other bottle. It was. Anyways, I overpaid for this bottle just monetarily wise. Other places had it. I couldn't get it at the time, but this one I could get it. It was $50. It was 40 something, 48, 49. So there it is. So just under $50. So let's see. We got any action going on here? No, not really. Kinda, maybe a little bit. Yeah. There we go. There we go. All right, not too bad. Not too shabby. So let's break out Mr. Randy's handy dandy whiskey color scale. Off camera, I'm going to nail this down to roughly a Palo Cortado sherry, which kind of makes sense a little bit. It's too dark for that. Not dark enough, in my opinion, for that. That looks like it comes through a little more on the camera as a burnt amber. But off camera, it definitely hits that Palo Cortado sherry, because it is a sherry cask. No information on how long it matured in either one. It just says that these were all blended up and then bottled. So some of these, maybe it was a Highland and a sherry and a Speyside and a bourbon. There's no specifics on how these were, done separately. So on the nose, it's a very nice nose, actually. I think it's much better than off the rip. I think the nose definitely came out a little bit for the game. It's kind of hard to pull things out of this, but I would say like a light fruit, honey. Why is there always like heather? There's always like tinge of heather. What does heather smell like? It's sort of a soft sort of, I don't know. It's like a flowerish, but like I want to say like a textile. It's kind of weird. I don't know how. I'll look into that and try and nail that down. There's not a whole lot of ethanol character on the nose. It's a nice, beautiful nose. It really worked out well, but this is only halfway now. Now we got the final pour. We're going to see what that nose does on the final pour, but let's get this on the palate and talk about why it's called sheep dip. Interesting. So there is some decent viscosity that does transfer well. The palate does not quite line up with the nose. There's a little bit more like a deep, mellow, rich, but spiciness. And the ending on the palate, let me just get another one on the palate, make sure I did that right. It's very juicy. Yeah. I got a little bit more juiciness off of the second palate, but there's a little more spice. There's a little more tingly spiciness on the lips right now. Not a whole lot on the tip of the tongue, but towards the top of the tongue. I'll save more of that for the finish. There's a lot missing on the palate that was on the nose. Why is it called sheep dip? Well, you see, back in the UK, they had what's called the taxman. The taxman would come around every so often, and he would count up all your belongings, and he got to choose how much they would tax you for what you have. Now, it was already pretty hard enough living back in those days, and then you got this butthole coming around, taking more money out of your pocket that you worked so hard to do. Well, we all know that's still today, right? That still goes on today. But they would come to you, and they would take it directly from you right then and there. So what these farmers and ranchers would do is they would supplement their income because they got a field where they grow a lot of this stuff that's used to do this, to make these spirits. So they'd have these small little distillers, these little stills in their barns or whatnot. And on the side, while they had time, they would make some spirits. And the tax man was so happy you would. He was so happy that you wouldn't do this, because then he got to tax you even more for that stuff. Because why? People valued it. It was money. It was money in a bottle. So then they took it out of your pocket and put it in theirs. So every time the tax man would come around and he'd be looking for those bottles, well, they wouldn't find them, would he? So this carries into a little bit of a segue, a little side step here. Mr. Randy went to a inventory liquidation sale. Now, every year, the industry, the sellers of libations and whatnot, they get taxed on what they have on the shelf. So the less bottles they have on the shelf, the less they get taxed for. And the more bottles they sell off the shelf, the more money they can make. It's just kind of it's the way it works. And it's the smart move to get rid of these bottles before the tax man comes around and takes more money out of your pocket. So what they did was, they had this like setup. If you had sheep, you had this process called sheep dipping, and you'd have this pool or a puddle or like some kind of setup to where you have your sheep go in, or you would dip them into this vat of insecticides, and it's of water, and it smelled horrible. I've been on ranches and farms, and there's a lot of smells you'll never smell unless you go out there. There's nothing like it. After a while, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But for the average person, horrible, horrible thing, especially a tax man. So what these people did was they put their bottles in the bottom of the sheep dip. Now that tax man, he might go close enough just to peer at it, but he would definitely not go anywhere. Definitely not putting his hands down in there looking for these bottles. And that's how you got away with not paying a tax man for your bottles of spirits. And that's why they called it sheep dip. There you go. I think it's a pretty interesting story. Very good way to stick it to the tax man. There's other different tax stories that they used to do to avoid paying taxes for things they shouldn't be paying for every single year. But that's other deal. So let's go ahead and get the finish on this. There's a little bit left. There you go. The finish is pretty mild. It's pretty mild. Most of it's going right to the top of the tongue. It has a sort of lingering oak characteristic. It's still got a little bit of that lively juiciness, but there's not a whole lot of sweetness. Nothing else much coming out of that on the finish. There's the oakiness really seems to come out. Now, I don't think I can pick out any peated Islay malts on this, so that's kind of weird. I mean, no, I can't really pick any of that out. I'm going to continue. I've got still half a bottle to go until we get to that final pour. Hope to see you back there then. Let's go ahead and give a final score on this. So as of the moment, transparency is that the score on this did go up from the off the rip. I'm going to give this I'm going to give it a weak 4 out of 5. I was going to say a strong 3 out of 5, but halfway through, things did change. Some parts got better, some parts kind of evened out a little bit, I guess. But I guess if I paid 40, I'd probably feel better about it. So that's where I'm going to base mine off of, is that I paid 40 for it and not 50. So for a $40 bottle with everything that's in it, 40%, I would give it a weak 4 out of 5. My fair price for it, I would say I would be feeling a lot better if it was 35. I would definitely go for it for 35. Maybe even 35 to 40. I think 35 to 40 range befits it better, especially from what I paid for it. So yeah, would I buy this again? No, I don't think so. I do believe there are 2 other expressions out there. I think one is a little bit stronger, somewhere between a 43 and 46. And then there's a different one out there I know I've seen. It's got a different label, different coloring and whatnot. That label has different coloring, but there it is. Let me know what you, let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, thanks for stopping by here at Mr. Randy's Wine and Spirits. Have a good one.